Chapter 1: Murdering the Mafia Prince. The loud callabo music could be heard from the best snack in town. The music is the best, and so is the speaker's healthy nature helping to promote the sound. The broad scriptures Galaxy snack were now illuminating as the red bulbs pulled attention to themselves. Located at Rail_Bernabry, Galaxy Snack is known for always attracting people to itself. It is known as the Lion's Den. If you are not part of the Mafia squad in town, you dare not venture, especially not alone. The club belongs to Mr. Jaxtyn Adrian Watson, the most notorious and researched person in the whole of Cameroon. Don't dare whisper his name unless you want to get yourself into trouble. As handsome as his face is, he has a black heart, painted black. Cameroonians often muster that he has the devil's mark on his chest, signaling that he has been marked as the devil's own. Known popularly as the Mafia Prince, when he appears on any occasion, the earth trembles, and people hide not knowing what else to do. Tonight, Galaxy Snack had roughly 300 people in it. They all found pleasure doing what they like best: partying, clubbing, and messing around with the runs girls they could lay hands on. One could proudly say Galaxy Snack is the biggest of all the nightclubs in town. From the outside, it looked shady, to an extent of deviating the people from seeing what has actually been done there. When you enter it, especially from the main entrance, all you'll see is a normal bar with 2 waitresses and a bright smile. That's just it, a camouflage. Real things happen on the inside. The connecting door from the hallway leads to what we know as the galaxy of the town, where everything is allowed, and when inside, either you come out as wretched as a church rat, or you might be as satisfied as anyone would be if the chart of luck faces you. In the inner club, everyone faced the round stage, all clapping as the lady they've been waiting for mounts the stage. Chelsea Ashlynn White. Half naked, she looked strikingly beautiful, her free hair curling around her shoulder. She is an epitome of real beauty. At 23, Chelsea is a professional stripper: straight legs, thin waist, full breast, and the only thing that covers her nakedness is a patch of dancing attire that covers her nipples and Mount Venus. So far, she looks like a queen bee, pulling the attention of everyone in the club. Saying that she is lewd is an understatement. Chelsea is good at what she does, and wouldn't hesitate to do anything for the money. I repeat _ anything. Her beautiful heavy lock of hair flashed behind her back in curls. His booted feet made the way to the pool as she held it seductively. The mouth of the men succeeded in falling apart. Lust is visibly attached to their faces as if it is a large banner. Seeing this, a slow smile popped on her face. It is only being 2 weeks ago she started working at Galaxy Snack, yet she had succeeded in gathering tons of million francs from the wealthy men who just wanted a round on the bed and let her keep the balance. She has barely had time to properly take care of herself during this period of time. Tonight, she heard the Mafia Prince will be at the club, but she has never met him before. Nonetheless, she wishes to see him, to seduce him, and definitely win his heart. There is nothing impossible for her to do. Looking at the DJ, she nodded her head, signaling him that it is time to start the music. As if on command, he turned the music highly. It was Crazy Bitch that boomed the speaker, almost breaking it into pieces. Immediately Chelsea heard it, her heart tripped a bit. She was happy that such good music still has value in clubs. Holding the pole firmly, she closed her eyes, ready to start the dance. To Chelsea, dancing is a stress releaser. It helps her regain her lost confidence. She is happy that she could actually come up with steps that would suit the inner man. Slowly, she went down on akimbo, releasing the flesh on her bum to be exposed. It is an impossible thing for anyone. Say that they didn't see her swollen bud of flesh which has been clutched in her midsection. Posing, she threw her head behind, flashing them her iconic smile. It looked perfectly beautiful, and as if the men were being controlled with a marine spirit, they cheered for her, urging her to do more seductive poses to lure their sexual desires to a boat. Mr. Jaxtyn Adrian Watson chose the perfect time to enter the club tonight. Seeing as the men shouted and hailed at a lady, he paid no attention. He is used to seeing them around and having them curl all over him, but then, she doesn't know why the men reacted in such a manner. Chelsea is the best, she will always remain the best, his bodyguard muttered to his colleague. They were all clothed in black suits, white shirts, and a black tie. The only difference is that they were bouncers, had perfect muscles at the right angle. Unlike them, their master is different. Jaxtyn looked like the moon god, tall, well-built, and a look at him could make a girl drool over him. It is evident that it was what he wanted, to lure as many as he can in his bed. At 28, Jaxtyn had made it big in life, prosperous, and had a big club that generated random cash for him. He is a serial killer. A gunpoint on your head is able to make you piss in your pants. He is the best and will definitely remain one. Tonight, he wore a tuxedo, accentuated with the blue check lines that one would see and think that he is a zebra. He looked like the prince that he claimed to be, curly auburn hair that cut across his nape, freshly shaved chin. His emerald green eyes seemed to hold so many emotions, his lips just a thin line below his flared nostrils. He is young, energetic, and power reeked through him. In his inner pocket, a gun rested there, as if in case of any movement, he would remove it ready to pull the trigger. In his mouth, an untouched cigar is in his mouth. He didn't feel like lighting it, so he left it there as a form of swag. Tilting his head to have a better look at the so-called Chelsea whom his bodyguard had talked about, he found the pull empty. It made his brows creased in confusion. Staring at his bodyguard, he wanted to ask a question when from the corner of his eye, he caught her actions for himself. This is the first time Jaxtyn is actually seeing her in his club. He knows all his workers by name of even face, he has had sex with everyone, one of them a dozen times, but then, he had never bothered to take a close look at any of them because they were just a cheap war as he thought them to be. For a minute, Jaxtyn seemed to forget himself. He seemed to stroke with Chelsea's beauty. She looked like a mini goddess, a crown might sit perfectly on her head, her dancing steps looked different from the others, reason why she had this strange effect on all the men in the club including him. Jaxtyn is caught aback by Chelsea's stunning look so much that the cigar from his hands falls off. "Sir? You dropped your cigar," Lewis said, calling his attention. Jaxtyn found himself blinking severally to keep himself in balance. He could not imagine that a stripper will have such an effect on him as such. Regaining his strict composure, he tried composing himself into one, not wanting people to think that the girl affected him. When he succeeded in keeping calm, he swirled his head to Lewis, who tried picking the cigar from the ground. Stopping him with a hand on his shoulder, he called out to him, "Stop, Lewis, that's gross, I'll have one from the packet," he said. With a slight nod on the head, Lewis removed another cigar from the packet and placed it into Jaxtyn's parted lips, which he accepted warmly. "Who is she?" he asked, walking to a safe part of the club where he could have a better view of the artist on the pole, communicating with it as if it was her friend. Jaxtyn had a running bulge in his pants. Each movement of the lady made him want to stop the show and ask her to join him in his chambers. He wanted to experience a new feeling with her, to know why she distinguished herself from the rest of the ladies who were strippers at his club. Robert hurriedly went ahead of them, asking the men to give way from the stand where Jaxtyn wanted to stand to watch at Chelsea. The only name that had repeated itself in his mind for the past 2 minutes straight. Mounting the stand, he shut his eyes at the lady. She was now swirling the pole professionally. The music had changed to Bad Girlfriend. She rocked the pole like she was the bad girlfriend. Lewis, drawing on Jaxtyn's attention, he said in a husky voice, given some of the information he knew about the lady. "Mr. Jaxtyn, Chelsea is the new stripper. She started work I think 2 weeks ago and is the pride of the club these days. Every man wants to spend a night with her. She boasts the income of the snack 2 times than the normal sales since she came in, as everyone wants to be her plug," he explained. Jaxtyn nodded his head in comprehension. He noted everything that Lewis said. He was his personal bodyguard and knew everything about him. He was more like his right-hand man, the person he trusts the most. But then, instead of Jaxtyn believing him, he raised a brow in confusion, wanting to know something. Nothing seemed to be right with what he just said. Wait, hold on, Lewis. 2 weeks ago, you and I were in Mellon for the meeting, and we just returned a day back. How come you know about all these things and I don't? Jaxtyn asked, eyeing him wearily. The meeting at Mellon was held between some of his collaborators and him. It was to maintain peace between two mafia squads, and Jaxtyn had been called to act as a witness to their peace-settling meeting. If he had gone there with Lewis, how then did he know so much about this girl? He is just setting eyes on her for the first time. Chapter 2: Hiring the Stripper. By the time Jaxtyn finished watching the video of Chelsea dancing, he had a hard bulge on his trousers. It was a strange feeling to him. Unlike the numerous strippers he had watched them dance before, Chelsea is an exception among the many. She has stood out against them, and JAS made an outstanding difference. Looking at the phone in his hands now, he barely had something to say as the actions in the video were the best. She was the best. The bulge on Jaxtyn's thigh indicated that he was having an erection. He had to put his hands in his trousers, bumping it a little, trying to hide him. He had handed the phone to Lewis, and he controlled himself, not wanting his harsh breathing to be audible. He had a visible hard barrier to break, but then, it was an easy task for that wall to come crumbling all the way with no effort at all. The worst is that the said lady who has recently piqued his attention is unaware of the effects she has on him. It is evident because the number of people that surrounded her stage is enough to draw the attention away from him. All he wanted was to sneak his way into her pants. Deep in Jaxtyn's mind, he had kept a place for Chelsea. Their only thing left is for her to accept to share his bed with him. In the video that Lewis had just shared with him, Chelsea was there dancing like she owned the stage. Just like tonight, she showcased her dancing steps. They were exquisite, the best so far. Each time she swirled around the pole as if she is going to lose balance, it was just another step for her to mount her energy and strike again. This is the main reason why she doesn't give up and keeps the men anxious to continue acclaiming, never wanting her to stop. Jaxtyn's mind was pulled away from his thoughts when a roar of applause shot through the entire club. It surpassed that of the DJ's soundtrack, which was slowing down. Many people were already ready to book a night with the lady who had just made a spectacular and professional dance track on the pole. The way she plotted her movements were the best, and her seductive costume wasn't making things better for the men who had lust plastered on their forehead. Jaxtyn looked with amazing eyes as the girl panted on the stage. The light shone brightly on her. She was the spotlight. Many acclaimed her, and when Lewis clapped cheering at Chelsea, he shot him a daring look. From all indications, he didn't want to reveal his true self just now. He wanted to take things slowly, especially with a lady he barely knows anything about. Clearing his throat, Jaxtyn eyed his personal bodyguard with full authority as he baits him to listen attentively. "I'll be at the headquarters. Send for the girl with immediate effect. If anyone dares to ask, tell them the Mafia Prince needs her, and she is thereby off for the night," he said. Jaxtyn's words were clear, they were pure, they spoke of his intentions. He wanted his message to be passed across as well as he had said them. "Don Jaxtyn, what if the lady refuses to spend the night with you? It's her habit of having only one night with every man __, so they say," Lewis said, trying to reason things out with Jaxtyn. Calling him Don is some sort of bossy title, he replies each time they call him that way, especially as it proves his originality and superiority over the men of his squad. Anyone that proves to disobey him will surely have him to deal with. In fact, he doesn't talk much. A bullet in the skull of the rogue is enough to correct the squad into correction, at least, if that is the only way the rest of them can understand the lesson perfectly well. Immediately as Lewis concluded his words, Jaxtyn buttoned him by the neck in anger, as he made his point to be more clearer than the previous one. "You dumbass young man, if she refuses on grounds that the money I'll offer here is smaller than what she will earn a night here, tell her Prince Jaxtyn is hiring for the night. She will have extra bonuses as she pleases, and if I am equally satisfied, I'll pay twice what she was supposed to earn tonight," he explained to him. The only thing he doesn't like is a failure. No matter the kind of disappointment he faces, he doesn't expect a lady to say no as a response to him. Releasing his grip from his bodyguard, he made his way to go, but then, he stopped, tilted his head eyeing him with so much seriousness. "Whatever happens here, don't bring me no as a response," he blurted out. Louis barely had the time to react. He knew who his boss is. He is capable of putting a bullet in his head. To him, there is nothing that is impossible. He is going to do it. The only thing is, he needs to have a small excuse where he can use to console himself, saying that he killed you because of that fault or your flaw needed correction. "Keep the gates of Hades wide open for me, mon ami ___, a French word for my friend. I'll meet you as soon as you reach hell. The devil and I are having a secret meeting." This is his favorite quote whenever he kills anyone. Jaxtyn is the epitome of the devil's wrath on earth. Apart from extending his territory, nothing interests him the more. He just wants to be known everywhere and by everyone as terror. He enjoys the privileges he has so far. The honor, dominion, and power he has over the other people of the squad. The whole of Douala belongs to him. Yes, that is how superior he is in the land, and whoever dares disrespects him will be put to the test. Jaxtyn walked away from his bodyguard and exiled his club through the small exit door. Chelsea stood around the pool panting heavily. Finally, the dance has come to an end. The round of applause she received from these men, but old and young, was overwhelming. This shows that she did a great job. Now it is left for the men to book her for an hour or less depending on how fat their bank accounts are. Walking down the aisle, she headed towards her lounge where she is going to wait for Matthew to bring any information to her. Matthew was responsible for booking her appointments. It was very sharp and easy to do, the first come, first serve, and she paced the floor of the small cabin. She wore something more fleshy, to hide her nudity, but there wasn't much difference with what she just wore a while ago and now. When Matthew was taking too long, Chelsea decided to walk out of her cabin into the club, hanging at the counter asking for a glass of whiskey. 50% alcoholic, add some tequila into the mixture, please, she announced gently. After the waiter had to combine some vodka, lemon juice, brandy, and tequila, he mixed it well before pouring it into a small glass filled with ice cubes. "Thank you," she let out. At least, it is a good thing that she hasn't forgotten her manners. It is actually the best part because she does not know what difference it will make between her and those cheap harlots from around. With her, she has a reason why she sells her body to these several men. She needs the money. Yes, she does. Each time she thinks about the debt, she just gets frustrated and is so determined to work hard. In one long gulp, Chelsea took the whole content of her glass in and squeezed her face as if she just heard some bad news. Well, she had a reason to even screech the contours of her face even more, especially when things have decided not to work in her favor. Chelsea made sure she was well balanced on the chair. She doesn't want to collapse from the chair. Ordering for another glass, this time 80% alcoholic, she gulped the whole content in 2 gulps. The young lady needed to keep her sanity, particularly with this kind of job she has engaged herself into. If she doesn't play her cards properly and leave with her money, she will only end up satisfying young men's sexual urges without actually anything in return. She heaved a sigh, closing her eyes to let the whiskey stretch through her body. It is evident that Chelsea is tired of fighting. She is clearly tired of selling her body to men who aren't worth it, but then when she thinks about how her family will be destroyed if they don't pay the loan her father borrowed 2 years ago, she tends to work even harder than she has planned it. Chelsea was deep in thoughts when someone sat beside her on the counter table. She closed her eyes thinking that it was Matthew. She expected him to bring the list of people she has to deal with this night, so she is up to start rolling busily. "Hey, pretty," the husk baritone let out, looking at her. As she lifted her head up, she saw him just in time, offering 2 glasses of whiskey for they both of them. Chelsea started playing her game of seducing him, as she knew that this was fresh prey. "Hello, handsome," she mumbled, winking at him. The person that was sitting on the other side of her desk was Louis. He rested an arm on the counter while waiting for the drinks. A look at him and Chelsea could possibly describe who he is. Some kind of shitty boss with the right bank account, but then, she was woefully wrong. Louis is just a mere bodyguard that was sent to fetch her. Since Louis was dressed in a black tailored suit, white shirt, black tie, and a handsome physique to wear things up, just that he was unnecessarily bulky, he had the structure of those young men who will serve as a bodyguard for a rich billionaire, or some leader of a bad gang. Throughout the meeting, Louis tried his best to remain as calm as possible. Since Chelsea is the business lady here, she tried laying down some credentials for those who cared to share her beds with. "You should meet Matthew and book yourself an hour with me if you want anything to do with me," she said. Grabbing the glass he had offered, she gulped everything. At first, it was cold when it entered her mouth because of the ice cubes in it, but then, the hot alcohol strained her throat, burning her chest. Chapter 3: Who is the boss? Chelsea could not believe her ears. What does the strange man mean by she is hired for the night? Was this some sort of joke or what? She wondered, working her mind to avail. Deep in her, she knows Matthew knows the rules. 30 minutes to an hour is enough. Besides, they weren't trying to make babies. Why then will someone wants to hire her for a night? She cracked her head, finding it difficult to comprehend that. Looking at the man who sat before her, eyeing her like a piece of cake he wanted to stuff his mouth with, Chelsea opened her mouth ready to start a conversation. "I am sorry to disappoint you, Mr. Whoever you are, but then, I don't let men hire me for a night. Nope. The highest time you can get to spend with me is 2 hours, and your bank account must be loaded, so loaded that it will cause me to be interested," she said, playing along with the young man that stared at her now with almond eyes. Clearing his throat, he said in a subtle voice, trying his best to convince Chelsea, without possibly saying that it was the boss that was hiring her. He wanted to play some games with her before actually revealing the truth. "Miss Chelsea, the issue is, you will be paid whatever you were supposed to earn tonight from all these men put together, so the choice is yours," Louis said. He had the air of a boss, he behaved like one. Also, he did well to cover his status as just the messenger. At least, he wanted to gain some credits for being a good messenger, of course. Chelsea didn't reply to him immediately. Rather, she turned around to the waiter, hitting her glass on the table, asking for more. "Let the mixture be stronger than the previous ones." "What's that? Some sort of soft drinks for babies? Come on, give me your best shot," she provoked the waiter. This made him not only give her what she wanted, but what might possibly end her career if she messes around with it. It all started with her mom, when she left Shang on her way back home from a business trip. That was when Chelsea was 19 years old. The accident jeopardized them so much because Mrs. White lost her life in it. What makes the Whites peculiar is the oil and gas company her father has ___ the Whites Oil and Gas Company & Co., located at the outskirts of the town, where there is peace and tranquility to work without disturbing the local company. If you live in Cameroon and have not heard about the company, then, you aren't a citizen. Everything went on smoothly until Mrs. White's accident, which caused great damage not only to the family but to her husband, who loved her so dearly, had always seen her as his soul mate. This caused Mr. Philip White to fall into depression. He became paralyzed, and his company suffered the effects. His company manager and co. helped to embezzle money during Mr. Philip's hard time, so much then when he recovered a year later, his company had suffered a slump. So bad for him and his family. Well, the manager was nowhere to be found. He had eloped with his family abroad, taking millions with him. That was Mr. White's life, what he had worked for in so many years, only for one gold digger to come and reap where he did not sow. Lucky for Mr. White, his mother, Granny Esther, helped to nurse him alongside Chelsea till he recovered, and when the stress was starting to get too much, he received a piece of advice to borrow money to invest more in his business, and if things do well, within a year or two, he will be able to pay his debts with interests on top. Well, he believed so too, not until years run by without him paying it back. Asterisk. Lewis was taking long to return to the club, and according to Chelsea, time wasted can never be regained. She prefers to enjoy her life with the people she has at hand, rather than chasing what she is ignorant about. If Lewis had never been grateful in his life before, then he was today, and instead of calling a particular figure, he muttered, jumping from the stool, "Excuse me," sending his hand in his suit's pocket, searching for his phone. When his fat, thick fingers touched his phone, he removed it, eyeing the caller ID. From his reaction, it was evident about who was calling. His eyes probed out of the socket, threatening to fall off and roll on the ground. It was none other person but the Mafia Prince. Even as his name was written on the center of the phone, Lewis felt like he was being monitored. Turning to face Chelsea once more, he apologized. "Please, excuse me, I'll be back in a minute or two, don't move," he said before disappearing into the busy crowd, making his way through the rear doors. Chelsea sighed. It is true that she needs a lot of money, yes, but then, is it worth to spend a night with a man? How much will it be worth it, she wondered. It has been 3 years since she left home promising that she will be back, 3 years of turmoil, and it is ending in April already. Time is no longer on Chelsea's side that she knows, but the money she has worked for this year is almost complete. She just needs to put a little effort into working more. She believes that she will have the money before the 5th of May. She knows she will, just that, she doesn't know how. Chelsea Ashlynn White is from the White's family. Well, their family was great, not until an ill luck decides to before them. Growing up with her parents in Bia, the southwest region of the country, she had always envisioned herself to be happy. She would always think that the bright side of her life will remain forever. Yes, they were supposed to live happily as a family, not until her life turned around one day. It all started with her mom, when she left Shang on her way back home from a business trip. That was when Chelsea was 19 years old. The accident jeopardized them so much because Mrs. White lost her life in it. What makes the Whites peculiar is the oil and gas company her father has the Whites Oil and Gas Company & Co., located at the outskirts of the town, where there is peace and tranquility to work without disturbing the local company. If you live in Cameroon and have not heard about the company, then you aren't a citizen. Everything went on smoothly until Mrs. White's accident, which caused great damage not only to the family but to her husband, who loved her so dearly, had always seen her as his soulmate. This caused Mr. Philip White to fall into depression. He became paralyzed, and his company suffered the effects. His company manager and co. helped to embezzle money during Mr. Philip's hard time, so much then when he recovered a year later, his company had suffered a slump. So bad for him and his family. Well, the manager was nowhere to be found. He had eloped with his family abroad, taking millions with him. That was Mr. White's life, what he had worked for in so many years, only for one gold digger to come and reap where he did not sow. Lucky for Mr. White, his mother, Granny Esther, helped to nurse him alongside Chelsea till he recovered, and when the stress was starting to get too much, he received a piece of advice to borrow money to invest more in his business, and if things do well, within a year or two, he will be able to pay his debts with interests on top. Well, he believed so too, not until years run by without him paying it back. Lewis was taking long to return to the club, and according to Chelsea, time wasted can never be regained. She prefers to enjoy her life with the people she has at hand, rather than chasing what she is ignorant about. The glass of scotch that lay before her was half empty, and as she swirled her head, she noticed Matthew dancing with one random girl. Swirling her attention on the pole, another stripper was there, seducing the young men and calling them to herself. She felt a little bit sad to see the men who had scrambled for her a while ago now focused on the new stripper on stage. Men and their lustful desires, it seems like they can never have enough of it, so is the sad truth. It is now the responsibility for the ladies to scramble their way through the men that pay well and heavily. Taking the last gulp from her glass, she stumbled her way in front, staggering. At first, a shot of pain flashed through Chelsea's mind, but then, she reconsidered it, thinking that it was normal for her to have that kind of a headache, especially as she hasn't had some good sleep for a while now. People always advised her that there was money in Douala, that no matter where you locate yourself in whatever club, you will always find customers. She thought it was a joke, but then, 2 weeks ago since she came to town and was directed to Galaxy Snack to work her money out, she has barely had the time to have some rest which she could brag and say she merits it. As Chelsea walked her way towards the center of the club, she pulled Matthew by the arm, disengaging him from the lady. She spat a small apology. "Sorry, miss, I'll like to borrow your man for a second," she mouthed. It didn't mean anything, especially as the music was too high for the girl to understand the message, but from every indication, she seemed fine with it, especially as she did not fight nor stop them. Girls around here are very known for that. Either someone stole their boyfriend and they are trying to get back at the last, or the two ladies are beefing, and the only way to settle the dispute is only through fighting. Chelsea took Matthew towards a corner of the club which was less busy. She wanted him to explain what was going on exactly. "My gee, what is going on today? Or have you found another lady that pays you for your services more than the way I do?" she asked, raising a brow. All that the young man could do was chuckle. Matthew is like Chelsea's guardian angel here in Douala, apart from the money she gives him every now and then has made him work for him. He is quite handsome, a French-speaking Cameroonian by origin, but then, he speaks English fluently, with a French accent of course. This doesn't bother Chelsea so much, because he always knows the good men to start with their names first at the top part of his list. The higher the amount, the higher the shares she receives, which is only being loyal. "Wait, haven't Louis walk up to you? See girl, his boss is the best so far. He will pay you more than you have ever worked for these 2 weeks combined, I promise. Just that, this time, you will have it with a prize. He demands you spend the night with him," he explained. Several questions filled Chelsea's mind. She kind of had cold feet in regards to that, thinking that it will be an absolute waste of time to remain here and spend the night with several men when one would gladly offer what 10 can't generate. Chelsea could not comprehend why Matthew was even happy about it, so she asked, "Why? Matt, why? I've told you before, no matter who the man is, whether he is rich to the moon and back, I do not accept a full night's service. Well, I've never tried it, so I can't tell much," Chelsea concluded. She suddenly looked solemn. To an extent, the alcohol was taking control over her. She needed to stay sane, even if it has to be for some time. She needed it so much. "Well, my favorite Chelsea, this is an opportunity you do not have to kick aside. You always complain of having financial issues. Who knows, maybe it's an opportunity for the boss to change your life," Matthew replied to her, resting his arms on both sides of her shoulders. At this time, Chelsea was sick and tired of hearing about this boss. He wanted to put a face on this boss, but then, no one will give her concrete reasons to know who he truly is. Or was a spiritual boss, she wondered. Chelsea was visibly fed up with the mention of that name, especially as everyone calls himself so around here. "Please, Matt, what boss do you all keep talking about? If he is here, point him out. I'll walk to him and tell him my mind about him hiring me for a night. My life, my rules. He can keep the money for all I care." Before she could put a full stop to her last sentence, Matthew cut in. His words were filled with power. It embedded the answers she seemed to be worried about. "The Mafia Prince, yes, I mean Jaxtyn Adrian Watson, he is the boss I am talking about, and I am sorry if Louis didn't make that clear to you when he first introduced himself to you." "Well, if he actually did," Matthew explained. At the mention of that name, Chelsea's mouth dropped open. She has only heard the name randomly from the girls in the lobby. Most at times, he was the reason why they fought. "Jaxtyn is mine and only mine. One old stay hitting her fellow lady across the face, and as a means to pay back, the lady will scream saying, 'In your dreams, I'll advise you to stop daydreaming because it might get on your head.' The other will reply, punching her across the stomach. On and on, morning, afternoon, and evening, the ladies will pass her time hearing their conversation, wondering if the Jaxtyn was worth talking about. Chelsea's mouth was gaping. She found it difficult to place the right words out of her life, and as she looked at Matthew, she wondered if she was his next culprit. Matthew's reaction was one in a million. In a mocking manner, he used his free index finger to cock Chelsea's chin as she forced her lips to close. "Be careful, beauty, I do not want you to swallow a fly," he joked. Blinking severely, Chelsea looked at the man that stood beside him, still confused. If she had heard that information well. In a wavery tone, she asked. "Tell me about him," she said more like a command. "Who?" "Louis?" he asked, rolling his eyes. A blush creased her cheeks as she spat. "No. I mean, about Jaxtyn Adrian Watson." Chelsea said the words with so much care. Chapter 4: The Mafia's House. There is a lot to talk about the Mafia Prince, yet nothing to say all the same. He is a closed book, fierce on the outside, and also on the inside. A look at him and you could tell he means business. Jaxtyn is the owner of this club, and I'll advise you to play your cards well. Who knows? He might let you go with what you desire the most on earth __ money. Matthew said. He knew Chelsea would immediately change her mind, especially when it has to do with money. The only good thing about the lady that stood before him is that she made her intentions pure from the beginning. "If I want to be a dancer, I'll buy a pole and keep it in my apartment where I will enjoy myself. I mean business, that's why I came to this club," she said the day of their first encounter. To Matthew, it showed how serious she could be. Even though there are several professions out there, she chooses this one and brags over it. At times, Matthew will always wonder what will make a young lady like Chelsea indulge herself in this activity. "Where is the lady? You numbskull, can you believe it's been 30 minutes gone? I hate waiting, like seriously, I hate it," Jaxtyn shouted over the phone. Nothing made him mad than allowing him in the dark. He was stretched on his couch. He needed the lady to be here. Had it been he had been the one to court her, she would have already been in his bed by now. But no, he had to send his crackhead personal employee to do the simple job for him, and yet, he was incapable of doing it. "What is taking you so long?" he asked, his angry voice piercing the ear space, making Louis tremble. Louis knows perfectly well who his boss is. A trick at him and he will be on his way to doom, something he dreads the most. In a trembling voice, he gave feedback to Jaxtyn. "I am sorry, sir, but I tried my best to convince the lady to come along with you, but she refused, saying that she only does an hour with her clients, therefore hiring her for the night will be an impossible task," she concluded. At once, Louis shot his eyes closed. He waited for his boss's verdict. The sooner it came the better it will be, especially for his sanity. "We expected, it came as early as he had planned it to be." Jaxtyn was mad at Louis for failing in his mission. He is not supposed to fail. Personal assistance is supposed to be the best, very supportive, and always does the boss's binding, in order to receive primes from him. "Wait, like seriously, Louis, what is that supposed to mean that the lady does not accept people to hire her for the night? Did you let her know that it is the Mafia Prince that wants her? Did you call me name? Does she know who is spoiling her for the night? I am sure that if she does, she wouldn't be fumbling around. Now tell me, does she know who the boss is? Or were you busily courting her for yourself?" Jaxtyn concluded. The fact that she had asked these many questions means that he knows who Louis is, always flitting around and losing track of the things he ought to do. As Jaxtyn had expected, Louis was guilty of many of these things. He confirmed it himself. It would have been a huge sort of disgrace, especially as it will mean that he is leaving his questions unanswered. It might cost him his life, and so far, he does not want to lose his life. Therefore, the earlier he reports himself, the better it will be for him. "I sorry once, Mr. Jaxtyn, but I didn't inform Chelsea about the fact that you sent me. I just played it low-key, leaving her in the dark," he muttered. As usual, Louis expected Jaxtyn to praise him, and to his greatest surprise, he carried the shock of his life, especially after he is being threatened. "Before I drop this call and call you back in a minute's time, let me hear the door of my room knocking. I will not tell you again. Your time starts ticking now," he said. His words frightened the young man. He felt like his life is being threatened. Of course, it was, especially when he was the cause. He wanted to turn the hands of time to a minute back or so. He needed to apply wisdom, especially when having to deal with the lady. This is all her fault. Had it been that she just accepted without bringing any problems, things would have actually been easier and swifter than this. In anger, Jaxtyn hanged up on Louis, leaving him in the mood of frustration. Rushing back to the club, he looked at the table for the pretty young lady she just met a while ago, but then, she had disappeared. Wait, what does that even mean? That Chelsea is missing or what? He asked himself. Of course, that wasn't true. Searching around, he tried glancing his eyes through the several people that were at the club hoping that he will meet Chelsea, but to no avail. He felt frustrated, devastated, and the fact that he will face Jaxtyn's wrath scares the hell out of him. Moving with anxiety from left to right, Louis searched for the stripper. His biggest fear is that she might probably be spending the night with another man. If this happens to be the case, then she is doomed, yes, more than doom. After about a minute of searching, he spotted the lady at the corner of the club, with Matthew. The joy that Louis had in his heart could surmount all his past experiences put together. Striding his way to them, his heart was lighter than before. Asterisk. There comes Louis. Remember what I told you, Chelsea, play your cards wisely, okay? Matthew said, rubbing his palms around the lady's arms. Chelsea, who is always known for being brave, courageous, and wise, now seemed to behave like a little inexperienced young lady who had just joined the squad. A slow, sensual smile played across her features. She blushed profusely, turning scarlet red in a blink of an eye. She knew that the color in her face had transformed into a bright red, so she didn't dare to stare behind. Turning her attention to Matthew, she wanted to know if she was anything close to perfection. Matt, look at me. How do I look? Am I okay to face the outside world? Please, tell me, is everything okay with my hair tone? Is it shuffled? Oh my God, please tell me, I am getting worried as fuck, Chelsea cried out, throwing her head back in pain. It was Matthew's place I comfort her, but then, he didn't want to take pleasure with her, he just wanted to boost her morale so that she can face the men without fear. Louis stared at the lady that stood before him, and not knowing what to do, he hugged her. The hug helped Chelsea to calm down. She inhaled some air severely. She needed to make herself feel comfortable, and above all, feel Matthew's cologne waffles her nostrils. They were busily hugging one another when a hug came from behind. It was obvious who it was __Louis. They parted from one another as fast as they embraced themselves. This time, Chelsea looked more confident. She looked like someone who is going to break the rules for anything, as long as money is involved. Swirling her head at the man just cleared his throat, she waited for him to start the conversation. A pang of disappointment hit her to know that she had thought for once that Louis is the boss. How ignorant had she been before? Pardon me that I wasted so much of your time. I hope that you have no client on your list tonight because my boss. He trailed his voice. Chelsea cut in, saying it as if she means it. Has hired me for the night, I get it, let's get going now, she said, rudely brushing past him. Louis stared at Matthew with wide eyes, wondering what had just taken place. Only Matthew knew what had happened, yet he raised his arms in confusion too, pretending like it didn't know about all these things. As Chelsea led the way, brushing past Louis, his shocked expression made him grab her wrists, still not understanding what chemistry was going on just now. A minute ago, the lady was adamant, headstrong about her services being hired for an entire night, and now, she seems so ready, so much that she is the leader. Louis was struck to the core. Stopping her tracks, he swirled to his side, ready to ask his question. With a brow quizzically raised at her, he let out in bewilderment. "What the hell is going on here?" I thought. Once again, Chelsea cut in, this time sounding more rude than the previous times. "What did you think? Does it matter now? See, if you don't want me to go, that's fine, but stop ranting like a wussy," she fired at him. Matthew's mouth dropped open. She couldn't believe that the girl had said that. In fact, his jaws had fallen, the same as Lau's own. The bodyguard had the urge to argue a bit with this lady, especially putting her in her place, but then, he remembered his Mafia Prince's voice. It rang in his head a million times. Shaking his head violently as if he had been in a trance, he decided to work things out perfectly. "I am sorry, Miss Chelsea, if you don't mind, let's go this way," he directed, opposite from the direction she was already heading to. She nodded in apprehension. Allowing him to lead the way, she followed him slightly behind him. Chelsea noted that it was a 30 minutes drive she had with Lewis. It was serene, peaceful, no one dared to talk with the other. Lewis's mind was troubled. Every now and then, he kept staring at the lady who had her mind on the outside. She didn't bother to start a conversation with him, neither did he, yet his mind was troubled. Deep down in Lewis's mind, he knows that if Chelsea reports him to Jaxtyn, he will have himself to blame, something that he is not ready to face. With Jaxtyn, H doesn't look at the number of years you've been loyal to him. What always triggers him to act is the one time you commit a crime. No matter how small the mistake is, if you are not careful, you might end up taking a ride to Hades, where you will present yourself as a parcel to the devil, telling him his loyal servant on earth sent him. Lewis didn't want that to happen, so the earlier he apologizes to Chelsea, the better it will be. He always wants to be on the safe side at all times, because he does not know when a bullet might penetrate his forehead, so he needs some wits to serve him that purpose. Going up a hill, Lewis parked the car in front of a mansion. It was big and was located on the hill. One could look at the house and admire it already. Chelsea's eyes were bright, they glow with several sparks on them. To say that the house is fantabulous is a slip of the tongue. She loved it, it was attractive, and she couldn't believe that she will be spending a night in there. It just looked like a dream to her. Chelsea sent her hand to open the door, but Lewis hurriedly placed his hand on hers. "Please, wait," he said, stopping her. Chelsea had lost the fight. She didn't have any anxiety to fight anymore, so she just sat there watching at him with wide eyes. Swirling her head to his side, she asked him with a reserved calmness. "What is it, any problem?" she inquired. Shaking her head in disapproval, as a sign to make him remove his hand from hers. He obeyed her commands, not wanting further problems with Chelsea. The one she has is already a big problem for her. Lewis seemed stalked in the face. It seemed like all the color in his face had decided to elope, leaving her in a very devastating state. "Nothing much. I am sorry about how I behaved earlier. I pray you find a place in your heart to forgive me," he apologized. "It's okay, we are all reliable to mistakes. The only thing that differs us is the ability to ask for forgiveness," Chelsea muttered. Her kind words made Lewis smile, it assured him, but then, he had something to add to his forgiveness. This is even more than important to him. Clearing his throat, he timed it right to spit out his words. "Please, Chelsea, when you go in there and you face the Mafia Prince, I beg of you, don't tell him I flirted with you. Just form anything like there was traffic or you had some things to do before rushing here, please, or this might be the last time that you will hear of me," he said. The look on the lady's face was compassionate. She seemed to understand the young man's plea, and what he asked for wasn't that difficult for her to do, so she will readily assist him. At least, it means a lot to him. Nodding her head, Chelsea promised to do so. "Thank you so much, now let's go," he muttered. Coming out of the car, they hurried to the main door. Chelsea remained astonished by the fact that it was her turn to meet the Mafia Prince. At first, she thought she would meet a young man, then, the picture of an old man suddenly plastered in her mind. Not that she is scared of having an affair with a man who is older than her father, just that staring at his face will be a big problem, something she wouldn't envision herself seeing even in the next 100 years. She literally had to stop thinking of him that way, because his name suggests he is young, yeah, but then, they are old princes, with gray hair, overgrown beards, and potbellies. Yuck! Just thinking about it made Chelsea squeeze her face as if she had heard some bad news. The thoughts scared the hell out of her. As they entered the house, Louis walked in front of her, stopping her movements. "Chelsea, you will have to wait here for a minute, let me announce your arrival," he said. "All right," she said nonchalantly. As Louis sped off, Chelsea used the moment as an opportunity to eye around checking if anyone apart from Jaxtyn lives in the mansion. Chapter 5. Shock. Jaxtyn Adrian Watson sat on the couch feeling frustrated already. He expected Louis to be here by now. It is exactly 1 hour gone, and the frustration was already getting the best out of him. Jaxtyn thinks that everyone should bow to him. He expected the lady to hop into the car the minute she hears his name, but then if that was the case, why wasn't she already here? It ached him to know that. The bulge on his loin was evident, though he kept it light. He pretended as nothing happened. Unlike the suit Jaxtyn had taken to the club a while ago, he had now bathed and changed into something nicer and more comfortable to his skin. He wore blue sweatpants with an elastic waistband holding his waist firmly, and also his ankles. He chose a pullover which was kind of free and didn't have a hood to accentuate his attire. So far, he could hit his chest and brag that he was well dressed to receive Chelsea. His arranged hair was now ruffled, and all he did was to put his hands through it, making sure that it is smooth as much as possible. His white socks held his legs firmly, as it made his leg look even more attractive. To say that Jaxtyn is handsome is an understatement. He looked strikingly elegant. The skin around his neck was one that was pure, neat, and every lady will drool over him. These are the things that actually make him think that he is more than supreme to the people who didn't have money as he did. A knock on the door made him stand with every ounce of energy he had in him. Hurrying out of the couch, he slipped his socked legs into his slippers and rushed to the door. Jaxtyn's hopes were high. He expected no other person to stand out of the door other than Chelsea, and when he opened it, he smiled brilliantly like a fool. Staring at his personal bodyguard out of the room with waves on his forehead showing how stressed he is, the small smile that had carved his lips disappeared immediately. Popping his head outside, he looked from left to right checking if someone had followed him. He expected to see a very beautiful lady, the one from the club, the lady whom he had seen dancing like she was the Pole's daughter, like she mastered everything that concerned it, and also its deepest secret. The anger that boiled in Jaxtyn was more than imaginable, especially as he didn't spot her anywhere. Grabbing Louis by the neck, he pushed him towards the wall as he crashed on it with his back. Jaxtyn tried suffocating his bodyguard as anger boiled through him. "You bloody scum, where is the lady? Why isn't she here with you? After wasting my time in this way, I tell you, Louis, you are going to regret it," he let out in anger, raising a brow to punch him across the face. Louis knew something like this was going to happen, but he didn't expect it to happen so fast. Instead, he was coming to announce the lady's arrival. This is so much against what he had planned. Deep down in Louis's mind, he knew that if he does not explain himself and fast, he will end up with a swollen eye, a broken nose bone, and a split mouth, something he didn't want for himself so fast. Louis was helpless, and the more he tried grasping for breathing, the more his master squeezed his throat, making him choke. He knew he had a chance to beg to mercy, especially as the girl was in this house. "Please, sir, give me a chance to explain myself," his words broke out as he stammered. With the position where he is right now, if he doesn't breathe in the next few seconds, he might go unconscious for a short period of time. something he doesn't want to happen so soon. Jaxtyn's anger seemed to calm down by just an iota, and he released the grip of his bodyguard. He needed an explanation. It is supposed to be worth his time. If not, Lewis will have him to deal with it. Jaxtyn leaned against his closed door from the outside, as he looked at Lewis, waiting for a reply. Lewis, on the other hand, a hard tone recovering. The effect of Lewis trying to suffocate him haunted the hell out of him, so much that he had to gulp huge quantity of through his mouth, and also his nostrils, making sure that he had the right energy to speak before his boss completely gets mad at him. Jaxtyn didn't have any patience left at all. Waiting for an hour or so is already enough, especially as he was ready to pay the lady's charges, but then if his bodyguard was wasting his time, that wasn't a good sign. Why didn't she come? You know I was waiting for her, right? Now tell me, what happened? He asked, crossing his leg against the other. Lewis knew this was the time to redeem himself and stop the foul game, so he said in a reserved voice. She came, sir. Chelsea is here, he said. Jaxtyn saw this as some kind of joke as he said, weirdly looking left to right. Where? He asked. She is downstairs, and I came here to inform you that, Lewis announced finally. Jaxtyn's expression changed immediately. Looking at the man he had punched for nothing, he said to him, Go have some rest now, I'll go downstairs. You can use the rear door. I want complete tranquility, okay? He inquired. Yes, sir, it is understood, he said, hurrying off. Jaxtyn arranged himself to walk down the stairs. Chelsea had idled herself, walking towards the wine bar that stood at the corner of the room. She admired the rich wine bottles. There were also several whiskey bottles of the finest kind. Holding one that piqued her attention, she was unaware of the man that stared at him. Jaxtyn stood at the bottom stair, glaring at Chelsea. He didn't know what she was doing, and he couldn't say she was stealing because she didn't put it in his bag. Gathering his strength, he said in one word, trying to draw his attention, Gotcha! This did not only frighten the lady, it made him drop the bottle of wine in her hands as it fell on the ground, breaking into millions of tiny pieces. Lifting her head, she faced the most handsome pair of green eyes. Thanks for listening to the audiobook Murdering the Mafia Prince. This audiobook is presented by Popink editorial team and author Brna Det. If you love it, please download Popink app on both Play Store and App Store. Enjoy. Read more chapters on Popink.